Hi, all you beautiful brainy beasts, and welcome to Copy Chat with me, your host Wei Lin. Today, I have juicy news to talk about. Google may be forever changed if the Australian government succeeds in passing a new law. Now, if that isn't exciting for you, I don't know what is. Okay, here's the news that will get us started. Google goes public with rebuke on Australia antitrust law. Now, what does this mean? Internet giant Google on Monday criticized proposed Australian antitrust laws, saying its free search service would be at risk and users' personal data could be shared if it is made to pay news organizations for their content. The company said the proposed laws would also help big media companies artificially inflate their search rankings, lure more viewers to their platform, and give them an unfair advantage over small publishers and users of Google's YouTube streaming website. Now that sounds like huge claims because all of these are very serious things. Free search service would be at risk. Does that mean I don't get free search anymore? A user's personal data could be shared. And that sounds really terrible to me because I don't want my personal data to be passed around like candy. And big media companies already are so powerful, and if they get to inflate their search rankings, it would only widen the gap between the most powerful and the least powerful. So, what exactly is the law proposing? So, if we read the whole piece, and fortunately I already have, so you don't have to, it doesn't actually say, which is very odd because this is pretty big news. The stakes are really high, and nobody's saying, it hasn't said what the actual thing is. So I went to look at the actual statement from Google. Now, whatever this law is about, it's been going since February 2019. So allow me to show you here in the Australian Google blog. It all began with what was called the Digital Platforms Inquiry by the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, which I'll now call the ACCC because the rest of the full name is just too long. So the ACCC did a preliminary report and took many months to investigate digital platforms, namely Google and Facebook, how they affect Australia, how they affect Australian companies, Australian news, Australian consumers. And this was a very far-reaching, very large report, and Google, as you can see, was very involved in the process. They were posting in February 2019. Here, this update was in September of 2019, posted by Melanie Silva, the managing director, the head honcho of Google Australia. So it is not a small issue, it's extremely important, and that's why the head honcho is the one making the post. The most recent post was this one, which was so important, it's posted on the international Google blog. And it is an open letter to Australians. Okay, let's take a look at this letter, and I've made a few highlights to show you what it's about, or the most important claims. It's not that long, so we'll be able to go through it really quickly. We need to let you know about the new government regulation that will hurt how Australians use Google search and YouTube. They don't mince words and they don't waste time. They get straight away to telling you that it will hurt how Australians use Google search and YouTube. The way Aussies search every day on Google is at risk from new regulation. You've always relied on Google search and YouTube to show you what's most relevant and helpful to you. I do in fact rely on them even here in Singapore, so I must say this really concerns me. We can no longer guarantee that under this law. Ooh. Why not? The law would force us to give an unfair advantage to one group of businesses, news media businesses, over everyone else who has a website. Oh, really? YouTube channel or small business? Okay, and here's the highlight that I made. News media businesses alone will be given information that will help them artificially inflate their ranking over everyone else, even when someone else provides a better result. So, why, though? Google, why? What would force you to give news media businesses alone the information that will help them get a better ranking. Well, why couldn't you share that information with everyone else? Tell me, Google. I really want to know. Your search data may be at risk. Google has to tell news media businesses how they can gain access to data about your use of our products. Now, that sounds really insidious. That sounds really scary. But you know what? If you're a marketer, you'll know all about analytics, namely Google Analytics, and you'll know that you install it, and then you can tell your customers' use of your products, right? How they navigate around your website, and what they click on, what pages they view. So Google has to be a little bit more specific about access to data about your use of our products, because what kind of data is at risk here? Like if you told people, what kind of computer games I play, what kind of adult content that I view, then I would feel really sensitive about that. But if I was browsing Google, and then I clicked on the article in say the Sydney Morning Herald, and you told the Sydney Morning Herald that I clicked on that article, I wouldn't really find that a big deal. So Google, please tell me a little bit more detail. Okay, the article continues. The blog post continues. The law is set up to give big media companies special treatment and to encourage them to make enormous and unreasonable demands that would put our free services at risk. That sounds really bad. And you'll see this law wouldn't just impact blah 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 blah. So, and it ends. There you go. Thank you, Mel Silva. So this is really fishy, and I'll tell you why. This open letter is filled with nothing more than bold assertions and zero evidence. So it doesn't quote any of the law. It doesn't state what the actual regulations are. It doesn't say who is involved. What kind of data are we talking about? None of that. But it has plenty of assertions about what will result from the implementation of the law. So I think I really want to say this as a consumer, as an interested party. I don't find this convincing, and you can almost smell it, that Google is leading you in the direction that they want you to go. So let's try to find out a little bit more about this, right? Because we don't want to be misled. To take us further down this rabbit hole, let's take a look at Silicon Valley's most respected analysis website, and this is called Stratacherry. Now, if you're a Silicon Valley wonk, or you're a tech nerd like myself, you may have heard of Stratacherry. It's very well respected, and they had a post about this not just barely a few days ago. Okay, and begins as such from Bloomberg. Google and Australia's competition watchdogs and change online fire, yada yada yada. Again, saying the regulation will force you to share information with external parties and put our free services at risk. Yep, we already seen this. Nothing new. Okay, let's get to the analysis. Now, when I read analysis, you would think finest analysis would include the rationale from the Australian government for drafting this law. But in this case, you would sadly be wrong. You would expect that it would at least give you both sides of the story, but you will not find that here. Okay, let's see. Here's the most interesting part of it. Breaking down the code, okay. And this is where it gets to the actual meat of the claims, the analysis. Google and Facebook make a lot of money, of which the Australian news media business feels entitled to. Okay, why is this code necessary? The code seeks to address the fundamental bargaining power imbalance between Australian news media businesses and major digital platforms. Just to be clear, these are the terms offered by the two companies. Google, content from your site shows up for free in search and Google News. Google does not charge for the traffic it sends you. Facebook, your users may choose to share your content with their friends and family. Facebook does not charge for any traffic it sends you. And so the author goes on, do you see the absolute absurdity? The language suggests that Google and Facebook are using their gatekeeping power to gouge news media businesses for sending traffic their way, when in fact they send traffic for free. So the author in fact goes on to say that if anybody should be getting paid, it is Google and Facebook. Okay, but here's the thing. Well, why does the law say that the code seeks to address the fundamental bargaining power imbalance between Australian news media and major? Why does it say that? Why is that an important thing? See, it says that the quote says that the imbalance has resulted in news media businesses accepting less favorable terms for the inclusion of news on digital platforms than they would otherwise agree to. Is that true? Do we have to at least examine it rather than to dismiss it out of hand by saying that, hey, Google and Facebook are giving traffic for free, right? So maybe the right thing to do now, why don't we examine the FAQ that the ACCC put forward, so that we can see what it is all about. And Stratacherry kindly linked to it here, and this is the actual document. All right, here you can see. Here's Q&A, draft news media and digital platforms mandatory bargaining code. And right on the first, part, we can see a little bit more about the rationale. And isn't that crazy that, we've looked at a few sources now, and not one of them, not the Google blog, not CNBC, and not Stratacherry, have done any kind of job, decent job to help us understand the rationale behind the law. Here it goes. The draft code would allow news media businesses to bargain individually or collectively with Google and Facebook over payment for inclusion of news on their services. Right. Code also includes a set of minimum standards for the treatment of news on digital platform services, addressing issues such as providing advance notice of changes to algorithmic ranking and presentation of news, appropriately recognizing original news content, and providing information about how Google, Facebook make available user data collected through users' interaction with news content. All right. Now, to me, just on the surface of it, sounds kind of reasonable. I'd like to know a little bit more about it. I mean, I can understand that maybe the news news companies would like to be paid for inclusion of news on Google and Facebook. I do take Google and Facebook's view that they send lots and lots of clicks to these news websites. So how do we balance that? I think that's a fair question, and we should examine it. Appropriately recognize original news content. Yeah, maybe there needs to be some kind of credit given. Maybe there needs to be some kind of recognition when a piece of news is authentic, original, and not fake news, because we know that's a big problem. So if a news source is authentic and authoritative, perhaps you need to give some kind of recognition to that. Okay, and then providing user data collected through user interaction. I would like to know a little bit more about that, right? What kind of data and how it's accessed. Okay. Oh, let's take a look at this. Why is this code necessary? The code seeks to address the fundamental bargaining power imbalance between news media and major digital platforms. Yes. We've already seen this. Okay, this is new. While bargaining power imbalance exists in other areas, the imbalance that we see is being addressed as a strong and independent media is essential to a well-functioning democracy. So it's saying that we need to have strong media so that we can have a strong democracy. If we had only a few, hyper powerful media and all the small fellas were cast aside or were crushed by the weight of digital platforms, that would erode the strength of democracy. I can understand that line of argument. Okay. Does it go on to explain more? I think it would be good if they can tell me more about this. Let's see. No. Okay. Oh, actually, I'm going to uh, jump out of that for a moment because I actually made a couple of notes on this, and I think now is the appropriate time to highlight them. So let me put this scenario to you. Now, after you read that face news websites, news companies want payment for inclusion of news on the digital platforms, how does that make you feel? Just take a moment. Now, if you're not sure, I'm gonna say that's okay, and that is exactly why I wanted to raise this issue and found it a fascinating issue. Now, traditionally, news media hire journalists and publish the journalists' work in newspapers and on these news websites. They earn money from ads and subscriptions. On Google and Facebook, it is common to see the news summarized, in the search results, and also to be discussed in Facebook comments. People may quote directly from the news source, and that's how I talk to my friends and family, and how other people talk about the news. Right? It's very common. Now, the problem with this for the small news companies is that they invested the time and effort into creating and disseminating the news, and this is now being spread about for free on Google and Facebook. And consequently, they have no control over any aspect of their work on these platforms. They cannot, decide how it is presented. They cannot control if there are bad comments on it. They cannot control if there are any inaccuracies in how it's presented. Okay, so there's a little bit of complaint there. So Google's argument, as we all know, is that they send millions of dollars of ad revenue through to their media partners and billions of clicks to the news sites, and it shouldn't be made to pay, for showing those news because they're actually giving a net benefit to the news companies. And Facebook could very well argue the same, right? Although we haven't actually covered any response from Facebook, so it's just hypothetical. Now, on the other hand, though, and this is the part that is not well represented, the news companies can argue that users skip visiting their humble website because Google and Facebook take or allow users to take the news content without permission and without compensation. Right? So just think about that for a moment. Whether or not you agree with it, I think you can try to understand it. It's worthwhile to take this, one step further to understand the advantage that both platforms have. Google and Facebook know who you are because you are signed up, you have an account, and you have activity. What you click on. They can serve ads to you that are targeted and relevant. These buzzwords that they always use. And when they make all that, sweet ad money, well, they can get to keep it. And in return, they send some clicks to the news companies, and they do provide some data on the clicks and impressions that these articles receive. That's all depersonalized, of course. Your identity is stripped away from this data to protect you as the precious consumer from the evil news organizations who will do untold horrible things with your data. But it's okay for Google and Facebook to keep it, right? So the news media do in fact give up a little something when people consume the news mainly through Google and Facebook. Now, if they consumed it on their own website, on the news website, the news media could get a little bit more understanding about who you are. They could use cookies to track you, they could ask you to sign up, and so on. Okay, so far, it is clear why this greatly concerns Australian consumers and news companies. However, I say that this could change Google forever, and here's why. Google is being forced to reveal changes to their algorithm in this draft law. And this is the secret sauce, the foundation to Google's decades of success, and it has never been revealed before. Now, you already saw Mel Silva, the MD of Google Australia, said that news media business alone would be given info that would help them artificially inflate their ranking over everyone else. Of course, they could choose to reveal that information to everyone else and allow everyone to rank based on their own hard work. Revealing Google's algorithm would really shake up digital marketing hugely. It would be like a seismic change. Fortunes would be made and fortunes would be lost. Media empires could rise or fall depending on their ability to react to the new landscape. New high quality search engines could arise based on this now public deeper understanding of Google's inner workings. And imagine all of this could be triggered by the passing of one law in one country half a world away from Google's home market of the United States. Now let that just marinate in your mind for a moment. How mind-blowing that is. And that is why this law is arguably the most important law today. And that is why we see that Google is fighting tooth and nail, going on an all-out charm offensive, publishing an open letter to all Australians, getting their opinion, out there in all the news media, because clearly the Australian government's stand that it would protect small businesses is not being reflected. So we got to ask the question why that's the case. And it's your guess is as good as mine why the coverage seems a little bit one-sided. So that's all I have for you today. Hope you enjoyed that. I really thank you for watching, all you beautiful people. Stay awesome. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. And I'll talk to you next time.